reason.
Yeah, me too. Don't know why.
Is it Windows Update Day or something? Is it doing a whole pile of stuff in the background, maybe?
Could
Tuesday.
be.
Last Tuesday of the month, Patch Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesdays are usually Windows Update Day.
Maybe there's updates. Yeah.
Wonder if it is doing that in the background. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so welcome to today's lecture anyway. As ever, I will start by asking if anyone has any questions from last week.
I'm guessing the tutorial things are down since you've not been able to resolve that. The peer-wise things.
Yeah, I did send out an email about that.
Yeah, just confirming it's like you've not resolved it in the meantime or anything like that, just in case we need to do them week by week.
No, it's one of those ones. Great. It doesn't work. That's actually something you can attempt to fix. But like I said last week, it's about 60 out of 100 and whatever it is, 150 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get it. I don't get why some people are getting in and some people aren't. So I've just taken it off, and it's one less thing for you to do. I know you'll be really upset about that.
One less thing.
Yeah,
Tony, my week last week was just a blur.
Yeah, I know.
See, when it comes to the multiple choices, when do they open up?
You mean you've not been checking Moodle?
I mean,
Friday.
I don't know. When do you think they open up, Casey?
Okay, okay. I'm on a little sleep. Leave me alone.
Friday.
4th of December.
Remember what we said about these things.
Get on top of it.
Get on top of it, absolutely.
Exactly.
And you will have a week, so you can do this whenever, but you can also do it multiple times. So I would suggest, given that it closes a week on Friday at 2 p.m, that you don't do your first attempt at 10 to 2 next Friday. Okay, you can do this wherever, whenever.
So would you say do a dry run, then do some more study, and then keep doing it till you get decent marks?
Well, I would start with the study part first, but that's just me.
Sorry, Tony, I have a question. See, maybe it's just my calendar. I'm not sure if you said that for the written report, it's gonna appear in the calendar, but I cannot seem to find that part on the calendar. Like I can see the multiple choices just fine, but the written essay is not there for me, at least.
There's nowhere to upload it yet.
I don't think I've set that up yet.
No.
Because I wanted to talk a wee bit more about how it will work before I do that.
Yeah.
Do we know at least a rough date, like month at least?
It will be the 18th. I actually thought I had put it in on the 18th, so it'll be basically the last day of term.
All right.
I think that was what we decided. Well, in fact, do you know where I put it? Do you know exactly where I put it?
I've seen it. June.
Yeah, you sent it to
in the
us.
team. So if you go to Teams in the general channel, there is a link to the CP calendar. And again, I'm talking really slowly so that it will come up for me, which tells me that the peer assessment is due on the 18th of December. Day. So what I haven't done is put the upload link onto Moodle yet, but it is on Teams. Oops, what have I done?
Can't find it.
What have I done?
It's all gone very dark.
What's it done here? Where am I? What have I done there? Why did it go all weird and then things disappeared? Did I just delete that? Oh no, that's what it is. Right, okay, so peer assessment due on the 18th.
All right, so it should be on our. Is it on our? Oh, hang on, it's calendars.
Not on Moodle yet, so I haven't set the upload part to it.
Okay.
Nobody can upload anything yet, I don't think. We haven't done enough. But it will be due in. And what I've been saying is, you do have the question, you do have the marking scheme, you do have everything else that you need to get started on it. So you should be starting to write it already.
We've got it on the My UWS calendar, because it says legislation 18th of February. I mean 18th Friday.
Yeah, but that's the multiple choice.
What's the multiple choice? That's not an actual task.
Well, that is so that's the 3 multiple choice.
Oh, that is not the actual written. Sorry.
It's not the written one. So it's not on Moodle yet, because I haven't put that up yet.
Right.
But the task itself is there.
Is it?
Yep.
So how are we looking at the written assessment in terms of contextualizing it? I know we're not supposed to do like a full proposal, but along the lines of putting it in the context of the company in the case study.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not just going through like, this is a piece of legislation, blah, blah, blah. It's actually relating it to the topic. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, it's what they actually need for their business, isn't it?
Yeah, so the question,
fair enough.
if I remember rightly, is to create recommendations for a formal computer use policy.
Formal recommendations, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Is that...
Because there's 2 or 3 of these things wandering around, and they're all slightly worded different.
No, there it is. I knew it was there. So you shouldn't be able to see some of those things because they are from old years and you should be hidden. So you shouldn't be able to see those, but you should be able to see this.
I've got 3
assessed case study requirements.
No.
And if you click in there, click in there.
No. Oh, there it is. Yeah. It's too much stuff.
I wonder if your PC's running like treacle because of the amount of tabs you've got open there, Tony.
Yeah,
so.
look at it. God.
Tabs open.
Right, so there's the task and the marking scheme.
That's it. I got it. There we are.
I'm sure that I showed you this last week. I'm going to check the video. See if I've showed you this last week. If I had to show you it again this week.
Yeah.
You showed me this last week at the end of the lecture.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you. I knew that.
But that was in
wasn't paying
tutorial.
attention.
That was in tutorial only. Like.
Okay, so it's all there and you should be starting on this already. So that's the task. And yes, it should be contextualized to a small enterprise rather than a big company. That kind of cuts it down a bit because if you've got a really big company with hundreds of employees and all that kind of stuff, then it makes a difference to what you're doing. So you've got a slightly smaller one, so it's a smaller task. So you can have a read of that, and if you have questions, you can ask them later, or you can ask them in the tutorial, so wherever. Or there's also the online forums if you want to ask questions, or on Teams. For all of you who are saying we weren't here last week, well, the obvious question is, where were you? And the second thing to say is, remember that the lectures are recorded. So again, you can go into Teams. There's a tab in general that points you to the recordings of these lectures. So if you missed last week, go and watch it again, and that should bring you up to date. Not only do you have the assessment already, all the assessments are there for the whole module. So you can see everything that's coming up, when it's going to be, and when you're going to need to be ready for. So there shouldn't be any surprises. Jason, you got it now? Any follow-up on that?
Sorry, can I just double check what Jason was talking about? Is it the peer assessed case study requirements? That was the link he was talking about?
This one that I'm on just now.
I can't see it on your screen.
It's under the assessments.
It's in the assessments section.
Yeah, the peer assessed case study requirements.
Yep.
That first link. Yeah.
Why can't you see the screen? You're not doing this with your phone, are you?
Nope. I'm on my PC and it looks like for me it's stuck on your screen. I can't see anything apart from like the list of things that you like play the videos from.
Yeah, I had that last week as well. I just rejoined the
Yeah.
call. And it
I was
fixed it.
going to say, if you're having that, just leave the call and come back in.
Oh, okay. Just one
It's
second.
a Teams issue. There's nothing I can do about it, I'm afraid.
Okay.
It's a Microsoft issue.
It's a Microsoft Teams issue. So I'll just pause for 10 seconds or so if there are people who are leaving and coming back in.
I do like how you gave the developer excuse there, Tony. It works fine in my machine.
It's always going to work fine on my machine. It's on my machine.
Works fine on my phone.
The texting though.
Okay.
Alright.
I seem to have accidentally closed PowerPoint instead of launching it. It really is going to be one of those days, isn't it?
Seems like that, Tony.
We had a wee issue in the last databases class where we were asking Caroline for help. She couldn't hear us for an hour. So we let her off. It was
that
her
wasn't
birthday.
an issue. That was just funny.
Yeah.
What's that? I can't hear you.
We had a wee bit of issue with Teams this morning.
No,
Caroline
sorry, I
couldn't
can't
hear
be here at all. I'm not be able to answer any questions at all for the next hour. I just can't hear you. Sorry. It's not my fault, but I just nothing I can do about it. All right. This is where we left off last week, assuming you can all see the screen now.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you, Gillian.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is where we left last week.
Yep.
We were talking about professional organisations, and we've been talking about some of the things, some of the reasons that professional organisations exist, what they do, why they're there, why they ask you to live up to certain standards that they want you to live up to. And indeed, there are standards for all of these organisations that are actually codified. So you can go on and see things like codes of conduct, regulations, all that kind of thing. And part of the reason these organisations exist is because there's a recognition, excuse me, that for some things, it's only the practitioners who can decide whether or not what someone did was reasonable. If you're lying on someone's table and someone takes a knife to you, after which you die, normally that's murder. But if you're lying on a surgeon's table and the surgeon takes a knife to you, and after she's done that, you die, well, that might just be in the normal course of business. All I know is I'm not fit to judge whether or not what happened was because of poor decisions or because when you're getting to that point, there's an awful lot wrong in the first place. So for things like medical and legal, and even for teachers, there's a recognition that actually the best people to judge whether or not others have done the right thing, whether what they've done is reasonable, whether it fits in with best practice, are actually other people in that profession. So, do we have a similar body for computing professionals? Feel free to stick something in the chat or to say.
Not to like the extent of, say, General Medical Council or Law Society.
So as David points out, we do have them, but they're not codified. We don't have to, as we talked about last week, we don't have to belong to them in order to get into the IT profession. During the lecture, and certainly during my tutorial, there was a lot of discussion about whether that was good or bad. What we can say is that it may contribute to some of the bad publicity that we sometimes get. It feels as if you can barely open a newspaper or listen to the news without being told about the latest for an IT project. Because there's no oversight. Nobody can say yes or no, that that was a reasonable thing to do or that conformed to best practice. And if it didn't, to say you're not allowed to do this anymore because you're not good enough. If someone had done it on an operating table, if someone had walked into a classroom and started shouting at the kids, they could be removed as a doctor or as a teacher. If a lawyer steals a client's money, they will be removed. We don't have that as computing professionals. So during the tutorial later, what I want you to do is look at this slide and have a think about it. Think about the standards that professional organisations ask you to live up to and see where the crossovers are. Are there particular things that they all agree are the right things to do? Are there areas where they change? And we can talk about that more in the tutorial. There's a kind of mid-ground between anybody and only the elite. So there's something called a trade body. So for example, we had a long discussion last week about things like plumbers and electricians and whether they were a profession or a job. Where they actually belong in that spectrum is that it's recognised that you want just anybody to come in and rewire your house. You'd like someone to know what they were doing. So we have trade bodies where they say, yeah, you are qualified. You have a qualification to change a socket or rewire a house or do the plumbing. Do we have that sort of thing in computing? Do we have a professional organisation that says, yeah, you've reached a certain level where we are happy for you to come in and do, I don't know, the English test and trace application?
But I don't think we've got quite that. I know there's the British Chartered Computing Institute, but I think the big difference between obviously like your plumber and whatever else is when you're fixing a computer, you're not really jeopardising lives, whereas a plumber could possibly flood or destroy your house if he's not registered to be able to do the job correctly.
Is Declan correct in that assertion?
I'd say that depends on what's on the computer. You know, if that's the NHS's main system that someone's working on, then yeah, they could affect lives and livelihoods.
That's what I was going to say.
If it's my PC, then it's just my uni stuff really, and figure that out.
I think it was 2 weeks ago where we found out that the English test and trace system was basically an Excel spreadsheet, and that no one was aware that there were limits to the size of data that could be stored in an Excel spreadsheet. Today we found out that because of that, an extra 150,000 people were infected with COVID, and an estimated 15,000 people died because the people who were running the IT did not do their job properly. If that's the case, do you still agree with what Declan's saying?
That's horrendous.
Thanks for throwing a spanner in my works there.
Yeah.
That was quite savage.
Shocking.
But yeah,
so
again, I do get what you're saying now.
Sorry?
I was just saying I get where you're coming from now, that makes sense. So it does, like, we do kind of require one in that kind of sense, if that was the case.
Nobody walks into work thinking, yeah, I'll change the spreadsheet and kill somebody. But if somebody whose job it is to understand computing doesn't realise that there's a limit to something like Excel, if they did have to belong to a professional body, I for one would throw them out.
So,
but we can
that
talk
means
more
that-
about that.
Sorry, that means their project management was horrendous.
Yes.
Wasn't any base. I mean, that's just, how can that happen in a government, controlled thing? That's bizarre.
The press are asking the exact same question, mate.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just like how, yeah.
Government-controlled things have a reputation.
It's literally incompetence.
Yeah, utter incompetence. Gold-plated. 16,000, that's horrendous.
I think the difference between, obviously, I was going to say as well, sorry. So obviously you can have a home, what would you call it, a self-employed IT man who goes out, maybe does small business, homers, etc. I'd think maybe for a big professional institution like a hospital, you would have to be required with a institution certification because of the risks that are involved within that job. I mean, if you do a homer and you lose, say, your customers' holiday photos from 2009, I mean, that's probably going to be gutting to the customer. But if you accidentally bork a database up for NHS, that's a bit of a different story. That's not, as I said, it's not jeopardising lives if you lose photos, but you could jeopardise lives with the database malfunction.
And they have, and my apologies, I think I said 15,000, 1,500. And the other Declan, you're absolutely right. Excel didn't kill anything. It wasn't Excel's fault. Excel didn't do anything it wasn't supposed to do. The fault was in the people who set it up and the people who didn't understand the limitations of the computer. There was no spreadsheet glitch. The spreadsheet worked exactly as the spreadsheet was supposed to.
Tony, you're sounding like programming again.
It's exactly the case. You're as well saying the person who drove their car at 100 miles an hour and killed somebody, that was due to a car glitch because the car shouldn't be allowed to do that. No, the car was doing exactly what the car's supposed to do. The spreadsheet was doing exactly what the spreadsheet was supposed to do. If you use a tool and don't understand how it works, that's your problem, not the tool's problem. 125,000 additional infections, 1,500 extra deaths, because somebody didn't understand that there was a limit of 65,536 rows in a spreadsheet. Or was it columns? Whichever way around it was. So I think those of us in IT can kill people. In fact, I think these people in IT did kill people. And that was the number that was in my head, 15,000 who tested positive weren't referred on. Chris is saying poor training, but I'm not blaming the operator. Again, the operator did exactly what the operator was supposed to do. They took the data, added it in. Basically, the way this worked, there was one central spreadsheet, people sent the data, and it was brought in. And someone had set up a system to bring in the data, and the operators did their job. They ran that system, and it brought it in. They didn't know that Excel had a limit, but the people who set up the system should know. It's their job to know.
What can the people that set up the system, could they have not have checked previously they had at least a decent degree of experience using Excel before they brought them in? So they knew that they were of a high enough quality to be able to do it.
Well, they might have not even said. I was going to say there, Gary. Like they might have not even said right specifically. We want to store all these records, and it has to be in Excel. It might just be the case that somebody's went in. Right, I know the solution for you. That's an Excel spreadsheet. Plop all your records and cases and stuff in here. So by their direction, they have been told to use Excel. You know what I mean?
But isn't that still the people that hired them's fault for not then checking that the people that came and said that previously had experience using Excel on a scale that is on this scale?
Well, the thing about business is you can obviously do research on your products and stuff that you get in, but a lot of this stuff, let's see if you were to like do a Google search for the software that I used to support, you won't find a screenshot of it anywhere. So you're going to have no idea how to operate that. So there's no way that somebody who's not IT literate or not used any of these types of systems before would be able to look at that and be, nah, I don't think that's going to do the job. You know what I mean?
The government has more people that are IT literate, so they should have brought them in to double check that everything was going to work properly.
You're then getting into an independent inquiry then.
I feel like as well that the government obviously have undermined how many cases there was going to be. So they could have just thought, oh, we'll never get to that limit. But they've managed to reach the limit.
Maybe, but I mean, all the local councils don't seem to have this problem. It's the private. It's Serco, isn't it?
The number for NHS test and trace is in the 90-odd%.
Amazing.
Where it was handed over to the NHS, the private ones are down about 15%, and it's cost £100 billion.
Oh, they're on it, aren't they?
Hope you're looking forward to the next recession, folks.
Yep, it's us paying for it. All that money.
Something else that we can talk about in the tutorial, including, do we need professional bodies so that that sort of thing doesn't happen? Because if we moved to a professional standing, we would have all these things in place. You couldn't, for example, hire Dido Harding because she was married to one of your mates to set up this system, even though they had been responsible for one of the biggest data breaches ever. So the person that Westminster put in charge of the English test and trace system was in charge of TalkTalk when it lost all of its user data to a hack by a teenager. That doesn't seem to me like a reasonable choice. It seems to me that someone who did that might actually have been told you can never do this again.
You'd think.
But because we don't have a professional body to say what the standards are, to say what the certification should be to be in a particular place, to have a suitable code of practice, people can actually do this with no comeback at all.
Also, isn't her husband the head of the ethics body in the government?
Yes, he is.
That would help, wouldn't it? It's mental. Bring back the
they all went to school together and all the rest of the stuff. But yeah. But let's stick to computing just now, because otherwise I'm going to get really annoyed and really ratty about all the things that are happening. So there are existing organizations. So there's links to them on Moodle, and you should have a look at them, if for no other reason than to see what their standards are, because you can compare and contrast what it is they're hoping to happen. So there's a BCS. Actually, there's no longer the IAP. It's now a subset of the BCS. There's the ACM, which is the American version. There's the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and you may wonder why that's in there. But of course, a lot of computing starts off with electronics. All of computing starts off with electronics. And there's a large chapter for computing in the IEEE. So all of these people exist, they have organizations, and they set standards. You can't connect one bit of computer hardware to another without it following an IEEE standard. You can't plug in a network cable without it following an IEEE standard. So maybe there should be standards for us as well. That said, we started off saying, well, we don't really have an organisation, and now I've pointed to 4 of them. Which one do we choose? Well, we are going to focus on the BCS because it's the one in the UK. It's also the one that some of your programs are accredited to. So if you're on, for example, the BSc Computing, the course is accredited with the BCS, and by doing the course, you become accredited to be at a professional level with the BCS. And I say a professional level because there's of membership. Just by a quick virtual show of hands, how many of you have joined the BCS as a student?
It costs £20.
It does.
But I did register. I did register.
I've registered.
So Helen, are you saying, oh my goodness, it costs £20, or it's only £20?
I wasn't sure what to do.
I couldn't get to the part where you actually paid for some weird reason. Their system doesn't
me
work.
too, Jason.
Yeah, I'm not the only one. I've had like 4 conversations with them, and their website is absolutely rubbish. It doesn't work properly.
It's a solid example of computer science.
Oh dear.
Well, it's come up to Christmas, and I thought £20 was a bit much. So
20 quid, right?
It is £20, but that £20 covers you for all the time that you're a student. So it's not just a year; it's for your whole membership.
All right.
And it's entirely up to you whether you join or not. But as with a lot of these things, what I would point to is not
Keeps you up to
anything
date with
you're doing.
technology.
Sorry?
It keeps you up to date with the technology that's happening just now, so that's quite interesting.
I must admit, I was thinking of a more mercenary point, which is what happens when you leave university. It might be quite nice to have on your CV that you take your professional responsibilities so strongly that you joined the BCS.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well.
Professional level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I say, depending on the degree you've got, you can actually start to work your way up the levels. So the same way as any other profession, you work your way up as you learn more, and you gain more skills and more experience.
Okay.
So it's entirely up to you guys whether you want to do that or not. But as I say, it might be something on your CV that just says, well, no, I'm different from the other 300 people that have sent in their CV.
My question, like, obviously, if you do a job, can your employer contact BCS and say, "Here, this guy's an absolute joke. I don't know why he's on your registrar," and for them to review it?
Well, anybody can, in the same way as anybody can complain about a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher.
Okay.
Okay, so professional organisations. Yelko's getting elected as president. Excellent. So we have organisations. They're not obligatory yet. We're moving towards that kind of thing. And it might be something that happens. We shall see. Does anybody have any questions? Yep. Okay, what I'm going to do is very quickly take you through a small presentation on the BCS. I'm not going to spend any time on it. It's just to give you an idea. It's on Moodle. And it's just a wee bit about the history. So it's been going for... I need to stop reading the chat while I'm doing it.
63 years.
Serbian finance minister got a diploma from a fake London college.
That's a true story.
Wow.
Matthew's saying, are the slides available to us? Of course, everything's available on Moodle. You should have read it all by now. So the BCS has been going for over 60 years. It's got tens of thousands of members. It has benefits, but it's also comes with responsibilities. And it's trying to get the same kind of status as you might have as a lawyer or someone in the medical profession. Whether it gets that or not, it does demonstrate your commitment. It's not obligatory, but says, yeah, I'm a professional and I'm taking this seriously. There are some benefits you get. So Helen was talking earlier about keeping up to date, and there are, you know, loads of things like that that you can get, and discounts and things that you may or may not want. But actually, one of the things that it does give you is networking. So there's a BCS chapter in Glasgow. And as you know, we're all having loads of meetings these days. So going along to those things can help. They're having them virtually now. But if you are, for example, the IT manager in a big company, and you're a member of the BCS, and you have a job coming, and you happen to have met a young, enthusiastic person at one of the local BCS meetings, well, maybe you stick in their head as somebody it might be worth interviewing for a job. So different levels. You can start with student and then move up to become associate, professional, chartered, and fellowship. Just like anything else, you can move up as you get more experience, more knowledge. But you have to follow the code of conduct, and as Declan points out, if you don't follow that, anyone can complain saying this person says that they follow this code of conduct, but they don't really. They don't have any professional integrity. They came in and said they would do this, and they didn't. They had no intention of doing it. They came in and told me they could set up a test and trace application, and all they really did was set up a dodgy Excel spreadsheet that couldn't store all the data. So not only did they not have that professional knowledge, they didn't take the public interest responsibilities seriously, because it caused tens of thousands more infections. It directly led to 1,500 more deaths. So they're not competent at all. And perhaps you might want to do something about that. Maybe they should never practice in computing again, because they haven't carried out the professional duties. They haven't enhanced their reputation either of themselves or as IT in the wider sense. So you can have a look at those in time yourself, compare them to the same sorts of things for the ACM, for the IEEE, and see what similar or different. Questions?
If that's the case, there should be some massive court case happening soon.
Yeah, you'd like to think so.
What's to say the government didn't sign it off knowing that that was going to be the case, though, that they were going to use an Excel spreadsheet? There's no, can't necessarily hold whoever set it up responsible when surely if you ask for a product, it's your job to check that the product you've bought is what you've asked for.
Yeah, you get a project plan with everything on it.
Yeah, and then you check the final product and make sure that that's accurate.
Exactly.
And going to be fit for purpose. And if it's not, you don't then go and use it until you have a problem.
Well, again, it's something we can talk about in detail in the tutorials, and that's why they're set up for exactly those kinds of discussions. But may I suggest that if you hire someone to build your house and they tell you that they want to, I knew I shouldn't have said building houses because I don't know anything about building houses, but I suppose that's kind of the point. If they send you a document saying this is how we're going to build your house, we're going to use this for the foundations and this for the walls and this for the roof, are you expected to know what all that means? Or are you expected to trust the professional judgment of the builder? And if you can't trust the professional judgment of the builder, why not?
Gets complicated, doesn't it?
It does. So finally on the BCS, this is the BCS's own vastly out of date. This is what they send me to show to students from 2009. It's got the same kind of stuff and tells you the same sorts of things. So again, you can go and have a read of that in your own time.
Forgive me, Tony, I get the feeling that this whole module is kind of abridged. It's put on a nice work face when you go into the work. Don't be a fool.
Not sure I follow. What do you mean?
Well, basically, like just like every workplace, you've got to go in, act a certain way, treat people a certain way. Otherwise, you risk the point of getting your job or maintaining your job, keeping your job. So it's basically like you could have somebody who is the best programmer in the world, but he can't speak to people, so he isn't there for long. But you get somebody who's perhaps not as good, but handles himself in stressful situations, deals with other people, like social interactions that might have been difficult. It's been able to kind of keep a certain set of like a set of guidelines that you would follow to be able to, come out and be able to do the job in a optimal way.
And again, we can talk more in detail in the tutorial about that, but is that such a bad thing? Surely there's a place for all those different types of people, including the people who actually are comfortable talking to others. Because maybe the guy who knew that the Excel spreadsheet couldn't store all that data was too busy looking at their computer or was too shy to say something about it. Maybe you need everybody.
Yep.
All right. So that's the end. For whoever was asking if these things are all available, everything's available on Moodle or MyUWS, whatever they're calling it this week. If you can't find it, the link's available on Teams. It's in a tab in there. You can go in and everything is available on there. Everything that we're going to cover is available from day one. And those presentations, oh, come on, are all available there from day one. So you can find all the core material, those presentations, all the supporting material that you absolutely should look at, all available there. And it's available for all the things that we're going to do. So the next thing we're going to look at is ethics. Before we do that, though, that's been an hour. What say we take a comfort break?
That would be grand.
Cheers. I'm going to make a cuppa.
All right, we shall have a quick break then. I'll see you in 5.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wolfgane's blooming by the trestle. Yeah, I bought him a rooster, stones from a ditch. Voice from down with Bill's father. Never snitch. Take the buttons from a yellow jacket, feather from a buzzard, blood from a bounty hunter's core black hide. Gets the tears of a widow in a thimble made of glass. And your mama and your papa, and you kiss your ass. Poison all the water, wishing well. Hang all them scarecrows from a sycamore tree. I find down all them honeymoons, put them in a pillowcase. Waiting next to the switchblade at the amusement park for me. Strangle all the Christmas carols, scratch out all the prayers. Tie him up with barbed wire, push him down the stairs. I'll wither you a pistol, keeping nightmares off your blind. Them sons of bitches always seem to sneak up from behind. Siphoning all the gas, your daddy's pickup truck. Fill up Johnny's tea bag.
Man, I should be a DJ. Did you see that fade out there? Was that not just a thing of beauty?
I was pretty impressed.
Done well,
to be
dog.
honest with
Done
you.
well.
Okay. Now that you've had a wee bit of education on proper music, we'll continue on with your previously scheduled show.
What was that
Very
music?
slowly.
Oh, I was away.
There we go.
Sounded like jazz.
That was Tom Waits. You should
Put
seek
on-
him down and listen to everything he's ever recorded.
Can you put on Miles Davis next time?
Pardon?
You put on Miles Davis next time?
Oh, big fan.
Yep, me too.
But given that this is ethics and Miles Davis doesn't have a track called The Wrong Side of the Road, it didn't fit in as well. See, that's... Okay, so we want to think about ethics. And I know that for some people you're kind of thinking, no, I want to know about Java and routers and Python and web design and all the other things that you do. But actually, ethics comes into all the stuff that you're going to be doing. And it's going to come into it because you have to think about what you're doing, whether it's right, whether it's reasonable or not. And I hope to explain and prove that to you later. But before I do, let's talk a wee bit about what I mean by ethics. Because clearly, people have thought about this for a long time, millennia. So people have been thinking about what the right thing is to do for a very long time. We are just the latest to look at what the right thing is to do. Does a doctor give treatment to a patient where there's no hope? What's the ethics involved in giving them treatment that won't work? Is it better or worse to give them treatment that might prolong their life by a week, but they'll be in complete agony when they do so? What are the ethics involved in treating someone who's just gone on a killing spree and killed 30 people? Should you still try and make them better?
Probably.
If you're a doctor, there's no probably about it. You just do. So one of the things I want to do is actually get you to start thinking about these things. To get you to think about, thank you. To get you to think about whether it's ethical to get your wife to make you tea or not.
Is that your wife? I thought you just had a magical cupboard tea making ghost there.
Magical tea cupboard. Yeah. Good.
I wouldn't write that in our birthday cards.
Before we how we make decisions, because most of us probably think, oh yeah, I always just I weigh the evidence, I know exactly what I want to do, and I make that choice based on that. But you might allow that some people, not you of course, just other people, might act emotionally at times. They might use their heart instead of their head. And again, other people, not you of course, you never make mistakes, but other people can make mistakes. So in that spectrum of heart and head, and we'll just use the hands up. Now there are 7 to 9 people in this meeting, and I'm going to be counting them up at the end, so I do want you to actually use your virtual hands up. So for each of these options, put a hand up if you think it's you. So there's going to be 3 options. You always use your head, you always use your heart, or you're somewhere in the middle. So for the first one, you always use your gut or your heart first. So for your decision making, who would put up their hands to saying that they always use their gut? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, somebody's changed their mind. 7, 8, 9. Your gut, your heart. So rather than logical callous, just from inside you rather than thinking about it. Okay, so it's leveled out about 9 or 10. Okay, so all those hands down, please. And then again, virtual hands up if you usually evaluate the options, but your feelings do come into it. This is going up again. 32, 36, 37. Okay, 36. Oh, nearly up at 40. Okay, so that's about 40. Okay, hands down again. And finally, Mr. Spock, completely unemotional, always head, nothing else. Hands up if that's you. So about 10. Some people might say that that's a normal distribution, by which I mean it's gone like that. Live long and prosper, you too. Okay, so you can put your hands back down, because what we want to think about is frameworks that people use to make those decisions. And people have always done this. I've tried to have a checklist, if you like, for ways to make those decisions. So rather than just saying it's right or wrong, it's right because, it's wrong because. Because the choices that we make affect others. Perhaps not so starkly as 1,500 people died that didn't have to because I got a spreadsheet wrong, but other things. Somebody might spend money on you, even though you couldn't do the job that you said you could. You might just get something wrong. What we want to think about is how that affects us. Do we decide that, well, actually, we don't care? What is it about us that lets us make those decisions? And it's not whether they're right or wrong, because that's kind of what is the best thing. But what is it that makes us think about those things? What is it that lets us make those decisions? How is it that we go about making those decisions? And which of these things do we actually bring to bear on that?
My name is Jeff Sebo, and I teach animal and environmental studies at New York University. Today, I'm going to talk to you about moral status. In other words, I'm going to talk to you about who we have moral obligations to and why. Let me start with a quick example to show you what I mean. Imagine that you broke into my room and you ripped the head off my teddy bear. Most people would think that you acted wrongly. But why? Who did you wrong? Not my teddy bear, right? My teddy bear is a bunch of cloth. Instead, most people would say that you acted wrongly because you wronged me as somebody who cares about this teddy bear. So the question is, what marks the difference between me and my teddy bear? What makes it the case that you have moral obligations to me, but not to my teddy bear? This is the question of moral status. Now, historically, most philosophers have thought that the difference between me and my teddy bear is that I'm a human being and my teddy bear is not. In other words, most philosophers have thought that all and only human beings have moral status. But why? What makes us so special? Well, many people, like Rene Descartes, answer this question by saying that we have rationality, or language, or self-awareness, or some other very sophisticated cognitive capacity. This is what makes us special, and this is what gives us moral status. But recently, many people have started to question the idea that all and only human beings have these capacities. For example, Peter Singer argues that no matter which capacity we pick, we can always find some non-human animal, like say a chimpanzee, who has that capacity more than some human being, like say an infant or a severely disabled human being. In fact, it turns out that the only property that all and only humans seem to have is membership in the species Homo sapien. But if we say that all and only human beings have moral status for that reason, then how are we any different at all from racists or sexists or anybody else who discriminate against others solely on the basis of membership in a particular biological category? For that reason, Richard Ryder, Peter Singer, Tom Regan, and many other philosophers have argued that speciesism is wrong for the same reason that racism and sexism are. They are all forms of prejudice in favor of one group over another group solely on the basis of membership in a particular biological category. Dale Jamieson puts the point this way. To see why speciesism is wrong, imagine an alternate history where Neanderthals survived as a distinct, reproductively isolated species. Human beings and Neanderthals live together and work together and play together and are exactly alike in every respect except that they happen to be different species. Now imagine that in this world, you discover that your roommate or your best friend is a Neanderthal instead of a human being. Would this mean that you lose all of your moral obligations to this person? Would you now be morally permitted to use them for food or clothing or research or whatever purpose you had in mind? Intuitively, the answer is no. You would still have moral obligations to your roommate or best friend. And what this shows is that membership in the species Homo sapien is not in and of itself what gives us moral status. So then what is? What does give us moral status? Well, one option is to say that rationality or language or self-awareness gives us moral status. But this view would imply that many human beings, like infants and severely disabled human beings, lack moral status because they lack these capacities. And that view seems deeply implausible to many people. So for that reason, many philosophers have argued that we should expand the circle of moral concern by saying that sentience, or in other words, the capacity for conscious experiences like pleasure and pain, is what gives us moral status. This view would imply that the vast majority of human beings and many non-human animals have moral status. And many people find this view plausible because they say that you need to be sentient in order for it to matter to you how your life goes for you. So Peter Singer uses the example of kicking a rock versus kicking a mouse down the street. He says, a rock is not sentient, and so a rock will not suffer if you kick it down the street. So you have no moral obligation at all not to kick a rock down the street. On the other hand, a mouse is sentient, so a mouse will suffer if you kick them down the street, and so you do have a moral obligation not to kick the mouse down the street. Other philosophers think that we should expand the circle of moral concern even farther by saying that life itself is what gives us moral status. So this view would imply that all living organisms have moral status. That includes human beings, non-human animals, plants, even maybe species or ecosystems if we decide that those things are alive. And many people think that this view is plausible because they say that our preference for sentience is no different from a preference for human beings or, say, white people or men. These are all forms of prejudice for one group over another based solely on membership in a particular biological category. As Kenneth Goodpaster puts the point, sentience, or the capacity to have conscious experiences, is only one tool that evolution gave us in order to survive and reproduce. So why should morality privilege those of us who happen to survive and reproduce by experiencing pleasures and pains over other living organisms who happen to survive and reproduce in other ways? Now, obviously, which of these theories of moral status we accept is going to have profound implications for how we live our lives. For example, if we decide that animals or plants have moral status, then it will turn out that a lot of what we currently do in everyday life is deeply morally problematic, including but not remotely limited to the fact that we currently kill over 60 billion non-human animals a year for food alone. Now, at this point, it might be very tempting to say, okay, maybe all and only humans have moral status after all, because our lives would be much easier if this were true. But keep in mind that 100 years ago or 200 years ago, it might have been very tempting for white men to say, okay, maybe all and only white men have moral status after all, because their lives would be much easier if that were true. And what that shows is that which theory of moral status we accept has to depend on which theory of moral status seems most plausible, and not on which theory of moral status happens to be most convenient for us. It may be that we end up deciding that morality is much more demanding than we might have hoped. But as my college ethics professor Richard Galvin used to say, no one ever said this stuff was easy. So what do you think? Which theory of moral status seems most plausible to you? Do you think that all and only human beings have moral status and we can kick animals down the street if we want to? Do you think that all sentient animals have moral status, so at least we can kick plants down the street if we want to? Or do you think that all living organisms have moral status, so you can kick rocks but pretty much nothing else down the street? And finally, and most importantly, how would you have to change your everyday behavior based on which of these theories of moral status you accept?
You've muted yourself, Tony.
Unmuted and then it didn't work, so I muted myself again. Fantastic. It's almost like my computer's running really slow. Thank you. Depends on your upbringing, depends on tons of other things. Cats are awesome. Jelko's lost it.
Awesome, I got 6.
But you take the point in the video. Who actually gets to decide? Who gets to play God?
I think it's a group decision, isn't it? It's whatever's deemed acceptable by society at the time. Like the reference that was made in the video 200 years ago, it was perfectly acceptable in society that women couldn't vote and that people that weren't white male couldn't vote. Nowadays, if you were to suggest that, they'd be uproar. Look at the marches that happened over summer due to the mistreatment of one man in America and how much. If that had happened 200 years ago, it wouldn't have even made it into the papers. It'd have just been another day. I think moral status is a group decision by society, what's acceptable and what's not.
And I think a degree of flexibility to change that as we go forward as a race is also key as well.
If you say that it's down to society, what about where societies have differing views?
That's very true, because you've got different cultures that think different things. For example, over here in the UK, age of consent is 16, whereas somewhere like Thailand or Philippines, it's usually much lower at 13 or 14.
There's no age consent in Thailand.
Well, there you go. That's even worse.
I mean, you're saying age of consent, but actually we, for the purposes of legislation, treat people aged over 10 as adults, and we can prosecute them as adults.
Is it not dependent on the crime, though?
Nope, it's how they're prosecuted. And if we keep on the crime theme, some of us feel closer to America just because they're English speaking and, you know, we're steeped in their culture. But we don't have the death penalty here. And in America, they do. More than that, they have a new person on the Supreme Court who was promoted there because she promotes the right to life, by which she means she would stop abortion. But her first act as a Supreme Court judge was to allow the execution of a prisoner. Are there any ambivalences there? Are there any contradictions? And Stacey's ahead of me because she's saying, is there a set moral status that exists? I put it slightly differently. Are there fundamental behaviours that everyone could agree is right or wrong?
We've got laws for that to determine what behaviour is acceptable in a society, have we not?
But how do those laws get there?
Isn't that the point that Tony was making, though, Declan, that them laws are different in each country?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's obviously not a set sort of basis, you know, across the planet, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously things that are almost universal, like don't kill people, don't steal, you know.
Hang on. No. America just put somebody to death. That, last time I checked, is included in killing people.
Yeah, but what did he do to deserve that?
Oh, so it's about deserving.
Can you ever
I
deserve?
thought you said it rose above that you're not allowed to kill people. So which is it? You're not allowed to kill people, or you're allowed to kill people in certain circumstances?
I didn't say I agreed with it. I'm just saying, like, you know, that's the way that particular state in America runs. So they've obviously reviewed that under a court system and said, well, you've committed such a heinous act that we believe that your life is now forfeit. I'm not saying I agree with that. I think that's horrible. You shouldn't ever take somebody's life like that. But I would believe, again, I'm kind of putting an assumption here, I would believe that he's done something fairly heinous to deserve that.
But the question was, are there fundamental behaviours that rise above moral codes? Your suggestion was killing, but now you're defending killing.
But couldn't it be in the case of an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth? So you murder my family member, I murder yours.
Well, that sounds as if that couldn't possibly go wrong at any way at all, and in any level.
Yeah, never.
If they're understood to have you're going to murder someone by the state, if they're deemed to have understood the right and wrong, to that I would say, if someone kills someone, surely they don't understand that you shouldn't kill them. I haven't seen that disclaimer that David's put up about Warner Brothers films where it says these views were wrong then and wrong now, but it is interesting, and it's also interesting because it brings us back to the idea that things change over time. Some people want to be allowed to kill in self-defense, but whose choice is that? David makes a good point that widely accepted doesn't mean it's right or it's good. And Jason thinks that killing in self-defense is just vengeance. And Stacey's doing the setting the example part. And of course, just this year, in fact, just this month, last month, it became illegal to smack your children in Scotland. The idea of getting out of that cycle of using violence to discipline children so that they don't then use that on their children and so on. The point is, there are lots of different angles, there are lots of different choices, there are lots of different answers. And perhaps in the tutorial we can talk about whether there are any fundamental behaviours that rise above it, because we haven't got to any yet. Which brings us on to our next thought. Well, if there's no absolutes, what about assuming that everything's relative, that sometimes things are right and sometimes they're wrong? That you shouldn't smack a child for getting their homework wrong, but if they rush out in front of a car, maybe a smack in the back of the legs might just calm them down a wee bit.
No, there's no need for any of it.
How come, Helen? I know you're. Are you a mother, Helen?
Oh, surprise, surprise! Yes, I am.
I'm just asking, right? So, from your perspective, why is hitting a child not acceptable in any circumstance?
Well, in the olden days, we were all hitting flippers, chuck tatters, and things like that. And some would say, oh, it didn't affect me, and others would say it has affected me. That is why I say a child should not be hit. There's no need for it. You can explain to them why they shouldn't have jumped out on the road later on. And also you're doing that, making a spectacle of him and yourself.
I mean, I had that growing up, and it actually did have a good impact on me. Like, it did, for instance, it did stop me from touching the burning stove and stuff.
So it might be anecdotal in which you choose to do that or not, because some people might have come from a rougher background. Maybe you were slapped about a bit more as a child, and maybe some of you weren't slapped at all.
So again,
I think there's never a reason.
So again, we can talk about these things in the tutorial. Because what I want to talk about just now is whether there are relative ethics, whether, because we very quickly got into absolutes that we couldn't define, maybe things are relative. Maybe different people think different things about different subjects. Does it mean anybody's wrong? Does it mean anybody's right? Is there, for example, a base framework to which we can all subscribe? So just on a quick show of hands, who thinks there is? Quick show of virtual hands, who thinks there is a base framework that everybody can agree with? 2, 5, 8, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so we're slowly creeping up, but it's not an overwhelming thing. 18. So we're heading up towards 20. So you're not convinced that there's something to which you can get everyone to agree with. And later on, we'll come back to that when we talk about legislation. So you can put your hands back down now. Because for those of you who think there is, I have to wonder if you would know exactly what it is and you'd be able to tell people, whether you just think you know what it is, but it's more of a feeling of what's right and what's not. Or whether from the other side, those of you who didn't put up your hand think, no, we can't do that, but actually we could probably get together and decide what it is. Alternatively, some of you might think that could never happen. So let's quickly think about the idea. Oh, for goodness sake, stop hitting the wrong button, you idiot. Let's quickly think about the idea of ethical relativism.
The sort of comment that you get that's relativistic would be something like this. You make, let's say you make some sort of judgment about something, you know, I think that, let's say, homosexuality is immoral, or abortion is wrong, or something along those lines, and you get a response like, "Who are you to judge?" You ever hear that? You ever try to answer that? And say, you know, it's great. Say, you know, look, I'm a rational person. I'm aware of certain fundamental principles. Yeah, I'm qualified. I mean, you actually answer. You know, it's great to answer rhetorical questions. I was working once in Sears when I was in college, and I was asked what would happen if what would happen is I was working at night by myself, and I didn't know how to answer questions. I kept on referring to my boss, and the people were somewhat frustrated with me, the customers, and they asked me, well, what would you do if Fred died? I said, well, we'd have a funeral. You know, the whole, you know, or who died and made you boss? Ever hear that one? You should just answer it. Fred, he died, and I'm now boss. That's what happened. Yeah. Okay. But you often hear things like, who are you to judge? Nobody knows what's right and wrong. These are the sorts of comments you hear from people whenever somebody is sort of assuming a relative. Let me define what relativism is. Relativism is the view that there are no objective moral standards that apply to all people at all times and all places. No objective standards of morality that apply in all times to all people and in all places. That is, everything is relative. You hear that, you know, all moral claims are culturally bound. Now, before we actually go into the two main arguments that are offered for relativism, I want to make a distinction here that's important so that you can understand oftentimes when people criticize or when people affirm relativism, they often are confusing a moral claim with a preference claim. So, for instance, if I were to say something like, I like vanilla ice cream, that's a preference claim. I'm simply announcing to you what I like. But if, let's say, I said, killing or torturing children for fun is wrong, supposing I said that, that's not a preference claim. I mean, I'm telling you what you ought not to do, right? I'm telling you, I'm making a normative judgment. It's no good to respond to a normative judgment by saying, yeah, but I like to torture children for fun. That would not count against a normative judgment. So, for instance, in the a couple of years ago, I haven't seen this bumper sticker for a while, but there used to be a bumper sticker that said, don't like abortion, don't have one. Did you ever see that? Now, it's a weird bumper sticker because those that object to abortion believe that abortion is in fact unjustified homicide and ought to be prohibited on those grounds. They're not saying that abortion is something they dislike, therefore people ought not to do it. It'd be like if you saw a bumper sticker say, don't like slavery, don't own one. I mean, if somebody actually had, they would say, well, you would immediately, oh, the person who created this bumper sticker fully does not grasp why slavery is wrong. Slavery is wrong because human beings by nature are such that they are not property. So whether you like it or not is not relevant to the judgment. And yet, when it comes to moral issues, people often appeal to their preferences rather than attacking the normative claim.
So we have this idea that there's different thoughts, that they might work in different ways, and people might just have different ideas from you.
Could an ethic one be, like, for instance, you know how like the PS5 is completely sold out and then people are like selling them for 800 quid? And then you're like, is that wrong ethically?
Capitalism, baby.
It still stinks.
Console peasant, why have you not joined the master race?
I'm part of both, don't worry.
Everybody has their own judgment on things. They may agree on broad themes, but they will have different thoughts and different feelings about how you should live, what you should do, what is reasonable and what isn't. The question is what you do when you come across someone who has a different point of view from you. Do you say, my way is the one true way, you must die? Or do you say, well, I disagree, but the former leads to things like the Crusades. The latter leads to things like multicultural societies. And anybody who tries to impose their standards on someone else might just have a problem, because their experience might be different from yours. Someone mentioned earlier about the age of consent. Yeah, it's 16 in Scotland. It used to be 12 in Scotland. And you might say, well, morally, I don't think children aged 12 should get married. In a place where average expectancy is 24. Maybe their way of living is very different to yours. Do you have the right to make that judgment? Is it your choice to decide what is correct for them and their society? Are you able, if you make that decision, to just run in and bomb them because you've decided they are wrong and you are right? Apart from anything else, I can't imagine ever being that certain about anything in my life. So we end up with this idea of relativism. The idea that other people, other countries, other classes, other religions, other contexts might have different thoughts. We see it all the time. So again, quick show of hands. Hands up, all of you that eat meat. Let's see if we can do it quite quickly this time. Hands up, the meat eaters. 36, 42, 44. So just over half the class. Okay, stick your hands back down. How many of you are vegetarian? Stick your hands up. Just two? Okay.
What was
How
the
many
question
of
again?
you
What's the question again? Sorry.
vegetarian?
They need put in the bin.
How many of you are vegan? Put up your hand if you're vegan. Sorry, if you don't have the strength to put up your hand and you are vegan, do you, I don't know, just press the hand up button with your nose or something. Pescatarian. Yeah, you had to be, didn't you?
No, pescatarian. Only the fish that eats other fish.
No vegans?
I mean, I'm pretty sure vegans are only people who can't eat meat most of the time. Or
No,
can't
there's a difference between a vegan and a vegetarian. So, from my count, about 40 of you just couldn't even be bothered putting up your hands. Which brings us to another ethical question. Is it ethical to join a class and then not contribute when your colleagues are contributing? Okay, so we had about half the class were meat eaters. A couple of you were vegetarian. Jason is vaguely vegan, but not entirely. And 40 of you didn't understand the question. And of course, there was a reason I asked that question. I'm not going to play this whole thing because it's nearly 10 minutes. Get started. Please watch it later though.
My name is Tyler Doggett. I teach at the University of Vermont, and I'm going to talk about whether it's morally permissible to kill animals for food. One thing I'm not going to talk about is whether it's morally permissible to eat animals for food. I'm also not going to talk about whether it's okay, morally okay, to buy animals for food. What I want to talk about is whether it's morally permissible to kill animals for food in the first place. And we do kill a lot of animals for food each year. Millions of pigs are killed for food each year. Is that permissible? Over 20 million pigs were killed last year for food. Is that morally permissible? And in particular, is it morally permissible to kill pigs for food that we don't need to eat? I'm not talking about a situation where you're all alone on a desert island, and if you don't kill that pig, I'm talking about the situation we're in right now, which is we don't have to kill pigs to eat. We could all eat kale sandwiches, but instead, because they're delicious, we kill millions of pigs each year. Is that morally permissible? That's what I want to talk about. But let's talk about a different question first. Is it morally permissible to kill people for food? And again, I'm not talking about a situation like the Donner Party or situations where people crash land on a deserted island, and if they don't eat each other, they're going to die. I mean, would it be permissible for you to keep some stranger in your house and kill that stranger for food rather than eat a kale sandwich? We don't have to talk about that question for very long. That has an easy answer. No, it is morally impermissible to kill people for food you don't need to eat. So let me ask you this. If it is permissible to kill pigs for food, but not permissible to kill people for food, there must be some difference between that explains why it's permissible to kill the pig, but not the person. So what's the difference?
And on that cliffhanger, you'll have to watch the end of the video to find out. But even just the thought of it is interesting. What is the difference? I eat meat. I wouldn't eat people. But is there a difference between the two?
People contribute.
I've often said I don't buy my meat. I pay the butcher conscience money to not have to think about it.
I mean, I couldn't look at a nice little baby pig or a duck or whatever and then say, I'm going to kill you to eat you. I just couldn't. Hence why I go to, hence why I go to Asda, and that means I'm not doing it.
Aren't those animals born to like bred to be eaten, right? Like we mass breed these things to eat them. Like their existence is due to the fact that we want to eat them, right? Otherwise, you really think there's got to be like 20 million pigs, like around the world?
So that makes it better. The fact that we're actually bringing them into existence to kill them. That's better
It's more
than just
viewing
being
it
around.
as what else is going to happen to them otherwise.
They could live.
You tell
Like,
me
would they,
what is
would
going to
they
happen to them.
survive if there wasn't a meat market? Do you think 20 million? I imagine those statistics came from America alone. 20 million. You really think 20 million pigs would roam free and be able to survive on their own if there was a meat market, like fueling their food sources and such?
Yeah, so but
They just wouldn't exist.
Yeah, they wouldn't exist. You're breeding them purposely to eat, so there wouldn't be 20 million pigs roaming free.
Yeah.
Again, enjoying the conversation, so let's move it into the tutorial and talk about it in there. And here, what I want you to think about is what actually makes it okay. Because most of you are coming down very firmly on one side or the other. You haven't actually given me a reason. So again, a quick virtual show of hands. How many of you have downloaded music or videos off the internet that you didn't buy? You just stole them off the internet.
Will you get us into trouble for this?
No, not even looking to see who's put up their hands.
Well, I'll just give the game away then.
I think you probably did, Casey.
FBI, open up.
So there's 30 of you so far admitting to it. Okay, you can put your hands down again. Yeah. So a third of the class have admitted to stealing music or films.
See, in regards to, you know how like it's illegal to rip DVDs in that case?
Mm-hmm.
Surely if you buy the content, you own the content. So say I buy the Harry Potter
No, you
films.
don't, and we'll talk about it when we get to legislation.
Oh, there's that too.
Let me ask a follow-up question. So, as I say, a third to half of you have admitted to stealing music or video. So again, virtual hands up. How many of you have done that physically? How many of you have run into HMV or, I don't know, are there any other places where you can still go and steal a CD? How many of you have run in and stolen a CD or a DVD?
Before or after 16?
There's only one person with their hand up, and I don't even know if that's because they're admitting to it or because they haven't put their hand down yet. But what's the difference? You're still stealing the thing. Why is it different when you're doing it virtually online to doing it in real life?
Because digitally it's basically just a copy of one existing product, whereas physically there's been physical goods to go in to make that. So I'm not saying it's justifiable to steal digital content. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying it is much easier and much, you know, you can get away with it more often because nobody is actually missing something. It's just lost revenue, basically.
So you think that nobody was actually involved in making that music or making that film, and it hasn't cost them anything to do so?
No, didn't say that. I'm just saying.
Oh, you did, actually.
No.
I was listening very closely.
No, I said that to reproduce the item would, like, if you were to make one single program and then price that at £50,000 and then say, right, there you go. But, you know, it's not going to cost you another £50,000 to then go and make that, to copy that software and give it to someone else. Whereas if you were to make a Rolex, it would cost that amount to make a high quality watch.
Does the price justify stealing? Like, so because it's so expensive, does that justify stealing it?
Stacey's talking about artists not seeing money because it's going to a record label. What about those of us that have Spotify accounts? And every time you listen to a song, everybody gets 0.0001 cents. Digitally, I
that's
feel
still
like
a good
less
thing.
chance of being caught.
He
More
said
likely to get
it's not
caught
our
physically
fault.
than downloading online. So it's not anything to do with morals. It's you're worried you're going to get caught. So maybe that's a difference as well. You don't actually have a
Could also
moral
be-
code. You have a version to getting arrested code.
Could that also be as in like there's been times where I've like got a game and then I've liked the game and then I've actually went and bought the game, right? Because I wasn't sure if I wanted to spend that 35 quid. So I then
Post hoc ergo propter hoc. I don't think so.
what's it?
Yeah, I've not heard of
After,
that.
therefore, because of.
I mean, I bought the game in full value once I made sure I
Yeah, and
liked
how
it.
many games have you stolen that you didn't buy at full value?
None. Honestly, none.
I don't understand.
Liar.
There's like so many reviews out there. Can you make a
Matthew's
difference with
talking
that?
about no one physically there when downloading, but when you steal in a shop, there's someone there. There's actually been research done to show that even a cardboard cutout of a policeman, and the research was on policemen, just a cardboard cutout actually cuts down on shoplifting. So there's a place local to me, I can't remember if it's Home Bargains or Bargain Buys or one of those kind of places.
Yeah, there's some at Morrison's at mine.
And it cuts down on stealing. Most bands don't care about you buying your music because they make money for gig tickets for live shows. Well, maybe last year, but Stacey, they care about it this year. People pirate because it's easy, but does easy make it right? And if something's easy, are we okay doing that? Are you okay being one of those people that knocks on an old person's door and tells them that you're going to, I don't know, fix the guttering on their roof? It's easy to do it. It's easy to fool them even though they don't need new guttering on their roof, but it's easy, so do it. Or to sit at your job and not work hard because you can. You know, sit in a lecture and not put up your hand even though literally the only thing you have to do is press one button. Is that all right? And what about the other side of the coin? So that's when you're deciding to do something. What about when you decide not to do something? What if you see someone choking and don't help them? Is that all right? Is it all right to be in a group at university and just sit back and let the other people do the work? Is that okay? Is it okay not to check the code that runs an MRI machine, or this week, the code that runs test and trace? I'm not sure it does come down to personal abilities or confidence. There's also the possibility that, of course, as you've already identified, some people would have different responses in different contexts. So sometimes you kill someone and it's okay. There's a whole big discussion at the moment because there always seem to be bills going through about assisted dying. And there are different categories of people who you may or may not want them to go through. But there may be differences. And people make that qualitative judgment. You might feel happier about helping somebody who's 80 end their life than you are someone who's 40. And yet if they are terminally ill, what is the difference? The question really is, where is the line? Where do we make that decision? Those of you that have come across the Bible will have read, "Thou shalt not kill." There's no subclause in there that says, "Thou shalt not kill," except when it is expedient to do so. There is no subclause that says thou shalt not kill babies, but thou shalt kill prisoners. It says thou shalt not. So if you believe in that absolute thing, you must believe in it all the time. And if you don't, why are you making that decision? Why are you changing that? And if you're thinking that there are times when it may change, that is moral relativism. Lots of good comments in the chat. Stealing from a company is good if we don't like the company. That came from an earlier one, I think, where someone is saying that people at Electronics Arts have plenty of money. Well, they do, but they also have plenty of employees that have to be paid. Programmers, graphic artists, you guys. Victimless crime if you pirate. Well, if you steal a game or a film or music, in that game or film or music doesn't make any money, why would they make another one? So in the end, you don't have any more films or music or games. Lee doesn't think the Bible's the best place for moral guidance. So what is? Where should you go for that kind of guidance? If a person is capable of making a decision, so if the person is still mentally capable, then you let them make that choice for themselves, which begs the question, how do you know whether or not they are mentally capable? What's the test for that? And would that test apply in all circumstances? Would the decision that you make, for example, when you're fully healthy, to say, yeah, I wouldn't want to live like that, would that change when you are in that circumstance? Electronic Arts aren't stealing from you, Declan, because you're not forced to buy their game. They are selling something. If you don't want to buy it, don't do so. If you do want to buy it, pay the price they want. I'm not entirely sure I see the middle ground. I don't like how much Asda charges for a nice bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape. It doesn't mean I get to just take it from them. And the size of the company has nothing to do with whether piracy harms people or not. Okay. Fortunately, we could continue this chat for ages, judging by the number of things coming up. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. In fact, we've run out of time. Does anyone have any questions just now on anything that we've covered today?
I was going to ask Tony, just kind of going back to the start, this peer-assessed case study. So it's saying asking us to make a security policy. I take it we've not covered that far yet, so it's just pretty much have a look over what's required of us at this stage.
Yeah, so the things that we've covered so far are professional institutions, so you can start writing that up for your report. Right. We've started to talk about ethics, so you can start to think about that for your report. But no, of course, clearly we've not covered everything. But on the other hand, there's nothing stopping you reading ahead and starting to understand some of the issues. In fact, I absolutely recommend it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, see, just as well, see for, look, when we were in my UWS, some of your, you know, like the dotted boxes, some of them aren't getting ticked at all, and that's been a few days. So the one that I've got in front of me just now is the discussion forum. I've been in, I've posted in it, but it's not ticked the box at all. I don't know if that's just...
No, it's same here, Jill. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I shall have a look at it. Clearly, I've got ways of checking that anyway, so don't worry about it. Whatever you do, don't worry about it. I'm guessing it's just a Moodle issue. And the fact that you've been in and the fact that you've been putting stuff in, that's the point. It's a quick way for me to go and see, are people actually joining in? Because as you've seen today, some people can't even be bothered raising a virtual hand. So I need to get some way of understanding who's taking part or not. So don't worry about it. I'll have a look and see what the issues are and see if I can get it fixed, Gillian, and for you, Helen. So don't worry about it, whatever you do, okay?
That's fine. See as well, next, I won't be here next week, so will I just read on ahead, and any questions, am I all right just to email?
I'd rather you didn't email. Put them on either Teams or on the Moodle chat, and that way everybody can see the answers.
Yeah, that's fine, no problem.
And also don't forget that the lecture will be recorded so you can watch it later.
That's fine, that's no problem. I should be home probably about 3 o'clock, so if I can, I'll go into the tutorial, but all else fails, I'll watch them back.
Fair enough. Any other questions? Okay, just a quick reminder then. So as I said to Declan there, we've finished professional institutions. So the professional institutions assessment opens on Friday and it's open for 1 week.
Tony, is it okay if I quickly grab you after this as well? I know this is a tutorial, but...
Well, I was going to say we've got a tutorial. So
if it could be after the tutorial, it'll be 5 minutes of your time.
Okay.
Good, thanks.
It's open for a week, 20 minutes, 20 questions. You can try it as many times as you want, and it's the last attempt that's recorded. So it's up to you whether to try it again or whether to stick with what you've got. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't looked at it, they get progressively quicker. So the ethics assessment's only open for 15 minutes, but it's still 20 questions. And the legislation assessment is only open for 10 minutes, still 20 questions. So there's less of a read the question, go and try and find it on the slides or in the documents and then come back. It's about whether it's in your head or not. That said, if you've been assessed for extra time, don't forget to send me an email along with a copy of your assessment, and I'll add you to a group that gives you extra time for these assessments, and it gives you extra time to read them or whatever. But only if you've had that assessment and I need to see a copy of the assessment. Any other questions?
Just to confirm with you, Tony, the link that is the peer assessed case study, you've not added the other bit that we need yet, have you?
There's nowhere to upload it yet, no.
No.
Oh, no, I wasn't assuming that anybody would have finished their assessment yet.
Oh no, I mean, is there anything else that we need to know what to do?
No,
this?
it literally just is a link to upload it. That's all it is. All the information's there.
So yeah, so everything that I can see on that link, you can just go ahead and do the report from that.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, that's fine. I was just checking there wasn't anything else that you need to add. No.
I said last week I don't believe in hiding things. That's why all the stuff's there right from the start. And I know some of you actually don't like that. You find it quite overwhelming that there's so much information. But I would rather it was all available and you could use it if you want, rather than adding it as we go along. It just means you can either do it all at once or you can do it slightly in advance. And as I say, I would actually prefer you do it slightly in advance so you know which presentation we're up to this week. So read the next few just to get an idea of what we're going to talk about. But there won't be anything else added. There'll be no extra information, nothing, no gotchas, if that's what you're worried about. It's all there. The only thing missing is the actual upload link itself.
Yeah, no bother. That's fine. I heard you talking about that at the start, but I wasn't really sure what you were meaning. But that's okay. That's fine.
Any other questions?
Are the assessment multi-options or?
Yep, multiple choice.
Okay.
I'm not going to go through loads of them because do you know what I haven't done? I did have a practice multiple choice assessment and I haven't actually opened it for you, so I'll open that right now so you can play with it and see how the process works. So let me quickly open that for you. While I'm doing that, does anyone have any other questions?
I know that you've been making it clear that the notes, the slides are not everything in the notes, but see, to find the answers for the questions in the quiz, is that going to take some of our own research, or is everything on Moodle? Like, if we were to study everything on Moodle, we'd be able to theoretically get 100% in the exam assessments?
Yep, everything in the core and the supporting material.
Is everything that will come up in the multiple choice, yeah.
Any other questions?
When are we supposed to hand this research?
When you're supposed to what?
The hand research, like the report.
We talked about that earlier. I think I said the 18th of December. It's on Teams. So if you go to Teams general channel, there's a calendar in there. I think it was the 18th of December for
3
the
weeks and
written
Friday,
report.
Mohammed.
I did put it up on the screen earlier. This is the practice assessment, just so you can get used to doing them online. And it is a practice, so there's no marks for it, but it'll look kind of like this. I'm not even looking at these, by the way, so don't tell me if I've got them right or wrong. All right, it's just like this. You go through them, choose, and submit. Okay, so you can have a play at that. And it'll do this sort of thing as well. It'll tell you which ones are saved, which aren't answered. It's multiple choice. There's no point in not answering something unless you really don't know, because it won't give you any hints as to whether your mark was for the one that you're just guessing. So actually, you need to think. But it looks exactly like that, okay?
Hi, Tony.
Yeah.
For some reason, I can't see in the calendar. Like earlier, I couldn't find the. I don't know. I'm not in the group or something. I'm not sure.
There's a team. There's the general channel. There is the calendar. And if I go to December, 3 dots tells me that there's more things there. And that's when the peer assessment is due.
Come. No.
Any other questions just now? All right. In that case, what I'm going to do is
Hi.
I will.
Hello.
Stop. Yep.
Hi, Tony. Sorry, that's me. And I just want to find out, see how you've opened the, let's say the multiple choice, just the examples one at the moment. So is that just for a practice for, is it just for legislation, or is it just for the whole of the topics?
The one that I've just opened is the practice. That's what I just said. So it's a
Yeah, I
practice.
get that, but I just want to find out is it just for the legislation topics, or
No,
is
actually,
it for
it's just for the introduction. It's just information about the course. If you looked
course
at it,
itself? Right. Okay. Okay.
it wasn't actually anything other than, I don't know, let's have a look at the questions. This course covers which of the following categories? Answers to questions can be found in the presentation. So it's actually about the course itself.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Because it's just for you to practice doing this.
Right. Okay. Okay. No problem.
The
Cheers.
minimum threshold mark for each assessment is what? All right, so it's things that won't come up in the actual assessment.
Right.
They also don't change, unlike the real assessments. The real assessments will change each time. Okay, so the practice assessment is open, so you can play with that. Professional institutions opens on Friday, and you'll have a week. Stacey, before you run away, I'm actually just going to send a message to the guys in the tutorial just to give you all a break, and I'll tell them 3:30. So if you are running away, I'll say to them not to start till 3:30 because I've run over again.
Could I grab you in the interview?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Could I grab you in the interview? 5 minutes.
Pardon?
Could I grab you in between the startings then?
I'll try, Casey.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Bye.
Right, there's no more questions. Thank you all.
Take
I will
care.
stop the recording.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
You too.
Right, cheers.
Shout out.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.